Okay, let's do lab 6. Lab 6 is pretty much the same as lab 5. We're going to be studying the same things we studied. We're going to be looking at the flow rate depending on how the metering is set and how the pressure is set as well. And we'll see that the higher pressure actually is going to be coming out of here when we meter. Maybe a little bit different higher pressure. We'll kind of study maybe if there's some changes. But more specifically, what we're doing in this lab is we're doing metering in. Yeah. So we're talking about ascending loads. We're actually either lifting a load up or we're pushing a load up, and there's that back pressure pushing down. So it's okay to meter in. So that's when we meter in hydraulics. Okay, let's hook this thing up. Okay, as always, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up my basic connections over here to my pressure. And I'm going to put my tank in there. And before I move forward, I'm going to hook up this guy, and also I'm going to look to see if I have any drains. Now in this lab I don't have drains, but I'm just checking anyway. Okay, good. So now I've got my basic stuff hooked up. So I want to hook this up the way the fluid is running, the way I'm studying the fluid. And what I'm doing now is I'm studying the fluid going into the cylinder. In lab 5 we were looking and studying at the flow coming out, but I want to study the flow going in. So let's hook it up that way. So in my diagram, I'm going to grab a hose here and kind of start here. In my diagram, I'm coming out of my DCV and I'm going to go into my metering valve. Okay, so I'm going straight into my metering valve. Now, I have to kind of think about which way I'm going to go into my metering valve. I'm going into the ball side of my metering valve. Okay, so I'm going to come out of here, go into the ball side of my metering valve. Here's my metering valve right here. Ball side of my metering valve. Well, make sure that it's fully connected. And you won't be able to turn this if it's not in all the way. Okay, good. So now, out of my metering valve, I'm going to go into my flow control valve. Now, we know that I look at the flow going this way. So I'm going to be going into here, coming out of here, and then going to my cylinder. But before I do that, I can also see I've got a check valve in parallel. So I'm just going to do this. So I can run my check valve in parallel. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come out of here, and I'm going to go in to my flow valve. Sometimes the check valves and these guys have a little bit of pressure stuck in them. I'll show you how to deal with that later. Okay, good. So now the fluid is going to go into here and it's going to flow through there. So I'm going to go into here. And then I'm going to come out of here and go to my cylinder, but I won't forget about my check valve. Okay, out of here, into my cylinder for extension. Good. Now I'm going to hook up the lines going to the check valve in parallel. And the reason I'm hooking these guys up is because the fluid, when it's flowing this way, won't have to go through the meter, it'll go through my check valve. Now, before I hook that check valve up, I have to make sure that I get the ball side right. So the flow rate going into this is seeing the ball side, okay? This guy's going to go into the ball side. Perfect. So I've got my circuit hooked up. So my last thing is just to finally connect the line, because I've worked my way this way. Now I want to go back to my DCV. Now I'll have all my lines up, hooked up, and we can press play and watch this thing go. As before, I'm going to start with 250 psi. So let's fire this thing up. I'm going to make sure this is all the way off. That's good. Okay, this is in neutral. Here we go. Turn it on. I'm going to turn this up to 250 to start. That's released. I'm going to slowly turn this. Good. I'm going to turn it up to 250 to start. Let's go to 250. And I want to adjust my metering so that my flow rate going into my cylinder is at 1 gallon per minute. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, that's way too high. So I want to meter it a lot more. Okay, here we go. Let's try that. And we're getting there. We're at 1.5. So I'll meter it a little bit more just to get that flow rate down so that I can get it to 1. Yeah, just under 1. I think I got it. Good. I'm right at 1. Good. So now, starting from here, let's look at the pressures as I'm doing the flow rate. Okay, so I've got my pressure is 250 here. Watch that pressure there and also watch the flow rate. Okay? So the pressure there is actually lowering, and I'm over here, my system pressure is 200, 250 still, and I'm still at 1 gallon per minute. I'm going to come back. Now, let's crank the pressure up in the system and see what happens to the flow rate. I'm going to put this at 350. Watch the flow rate. Okay, it's a little bit more. Okay, so as I crank the pressure up, I'm having a little bit more. Look at the pressure there. So during extension, what's the pressure there? It's actually low pressure. Okay, so make a note of that. We're coming back down. Now I'm going to kick this up to 500 and we'll study the whole thing again. I'm at 500. I'm going to see the flow rate's going to go up, and I'm also going to watch that pressure over there. Here we go. Okay, the flow rate is at 2.5, 2.8, and the pressure over there is still slow. Of course, it goes all the way up when it fully extends because it's stopped and there's no more flow rate. So it's actually seeing system pressure at this time. Okay, good. So I'll retract that. And I'm going to shut this thing down. That's it for your lab 6. You've got all the readings. Now try to make sense of them.